maybe you've never done a budget before, but you know your expenses and you can list your expenses. Really, it's really back to that question about how much did you spend. But go ahead, Lynn.
Just before we move off to this budget, is the last question about capacity. So some organizations don't have grant writers. It's a challenge for them to find a place to even meet. They don't have resources for, printing material. I mean, those are the kinds of things that we need to know about your organization and the challenges that you face, because that helps us understand, what the limits might be. And if you're developing a project that we think you don't have the capacity to run, we're not going to be likely to fund it. And if you can explain what your capacity needs are in a way that, well, maybe if we can help you meet those things, this project could really go. So that's what that question is about, really, is for those organizations that are, don't have grant writers, don't have dedicated staff, are really first-timers that are struggling to come up with a project they think is meaningful. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
And absolutely, because I've heard, I'm not only on our grant committee, but I am on other grants committees, and you might hear something, wow, this was really well written, and that to me is like a red flag, because that means that maybe this organization has a grant writer, right? Somebody that's all they do all year long is write grants, versus a community organization, and you shouldn't be held to that kind of same standard. That's not equitable, right? When I'm reviewing your grant because someone has a grant writer and your community group getting together and trying to write this out kind of thing, right? So we recognize that.
Grant writers or
no. If you have a grant writer or have somebody that will write the grant for you, that's fine. I'm glad that you have that. But we have to recognize that everybody doesn't have that, and that we can't compare, say, Yale's Nature Conservatory or some other kind of organization, CFE, Connecticut Fund for the Environment, that has grant writers versus when you submit your grant, right? And we have to look at that. Yeah.
Are you looking for the fiduciary's budget if you have fiduciaries?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are we looking for the fiduciary's budget and fiduciary's budget if they use a fiduciary? No, it's not the fiduciary budget. It's your budget. The fiduciary are just the hands that your money goes through.
Yeah, and just to clarify, so this is, the attachment is for the project budget.
The project budget.
Audited financial statements for the whole organization if you have it. But earlier, one of the first questions was what was last year's budget. That's for the total organization, like what you spent on everything last year. But the attachment for the budget worksheet, we really just want to know the line items for this specific project.
Yeah.
So you would have to say I spent $500 on permits, $2,000 on policing. You would want it all labeled, like
If for the project, yes. For the organization total last year, no, just a number.
okay.
But we'll get into the budget worksheet and show you what kind of what we're looking
I think
for.
I put it up. All right. So while Raph been saying that, let me just pull up the budget worksheet, right?
So this is the budget worksheet. So at the top we have your funding sources or potential funding sources. So Greater Native Green Fund's already in there because you're requesting funding from us. And then the next column is the status, whether you've requested this funding or committed. If it's us you're applying for, put requested there. We haven't committed to funding anything yet. And then the next column is how much money are you requesting from us, up to $10,000. And then a lot of organizations are applying for grants from multiple areas. So if you're applying for, better yet, you have funding committed from other organizations, list those in the next columns. If you have more than 4 other organizations you're getting funding from, you can add rows as needed.
If you are applying, could that also be listed
Yes.
It's like you didn't actually get the money.
Yeah. So you put the name of the organization, and you'd say requested rather than committed.
Is this also in relation to like matching funds?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So then, for the amounts, the amount you're requesting from us will go in this column, just in the first row. And then for all the other organizations, whether it's requested or committed, just put the amount here. And then in the last column, you should have the total project budget at the bottom for how much funding you're requesting from all the sources. That's pretty straightforward. And then the expenses, we like to break it down between personnel and non-personnel items. So if you are going to require some staff member time on this project, you'll put like the names or the roles, one on each line, and then the calculation for how you're estimating the cost for this. So maybe you have a staff member who's going to work 100 hours on this project at $25 an hour. So you have $2,500 there. So some basic estimation, however you want to do it. And then non-personnel items, like if you're putting in a community garden, you'll need maybe equipment rental, dirt, whatever, seeds, yeah, anything else. So break it down. Just be clear and concise is what we want to know. We just want to know how the money is going to be spent. And so as precisely as you can do that, is the goal.
And so sometimes like with the non-personnel, right? So just say equipment. Maybe you have, you know, like for, like he said, a community garden where maybe you're gonna do equipment, you put in money for equipment, but then you get like a Home Depot to like donate stuff to you, right? Those are the little things that might change your budget, but then you've got money to maybe still work on that project, but to put other places. But you don't know that when you're first putting your budget, but you know you're working on stuff like that, right? Kind of thing. I'm just saying it's totally fine, and that's what we expect. So that's how sometimes people at the end have money, right? That they didn't use because maybe they said, you know, in the original budget that they were going to use it for something, but then you got a donation or something like that.
So one of the things I want to point out here is we have two columns in the expenses, one from the New Haven Green Fund and then from other sources. So the point of this is we kind of want to know how our funding would be spent if we were to grant it to you. So if you had like several funding sources requested, but nothing committed, we want to know, like, if we agree to fund you, what could you accomplish with just the amount of money we're giving you? So that's why we have this column. So maybe you'd want to put in like 5 community gardens ideally, but you'll put in as many as you have the funding for. So you can say from us, like, we'll be one of the gardens, and you can break down the expenses in this column. If you're unable to do that, if you've got some funding and it's all going to be in one pool of funding and ours is just going to be covering a portion, then just split it out proportionally. If that makes sense. Any questions on the budget worksheet?
So I have a question. So can you just tell me, how do you feel about all personnel? Like if the project and the money we're asking you for is just to pay people's salaries?
I don't have a hard line view of that. Like, I've been on both sides, so I get in the past we've leaned towards funding projects that involve less personnel expenses, but I can think of like smaller grants that really the only major expense is personnel. Is like getting your people out there, advocating for the community, and I think those are really important grants to fund. So I guess the criteria to me is more: are these dollars being put towards the mission? So if the personnel is like out there doing the project, that's fine with me. If it's all like administrative expenses and some things that are like sort of in line with the project but not really, they might be working on other stuff, then that would be a red flag for me.
Would, let's say, working with young people
Yep.
on an environmental project, would their being paid be considered personnel, or would it be part of the mission?
We would put that in personnel. Yeah, yeah, and I would just specify, like,
Okay.
these are the, like, young people we're planning to pay for their, hours. But then, yeah, in the actual grant application, like, you would want to talk about, like, this is part of the goal of this grant is to,
Reallocate all.
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, like,
And-
hey, these, yeah, the whatever community you're trying to reach and get them, just teach them new skills and things.
Right.
And we've had grants in the past that involve that, of hiring, mechanics, from underserved neighborhoods and teaching them skills and then having them lead workshops and, yeah, that's great, so, we put that in as well.
Yeah, he answered that. And even if you can't pay them like, you know, an hourly wage, but you're gonna give them what we call a stipend or incentive, you know, a gift card, you know, things like that. Now, gift card wouldn't be personnel, but there's like, the stipend would go under, a stipend payment would go under personnel.
Yeah, that's, in other words, I don't wanna give a hard line answer, like, if it's all personnel, then
Yeah.
you list that, like, the cases like that, that's the funding directly in line with the project goal and mission, so. Any other budget-related questions?